So James, it's really good to see you again, and thank you so much for coming along today. The idea of today's conversation is to start talking about your own practice and really thinking about where you're at as a teacher, but also perhaps as a leader, just as at the beginning of this whole annual review cycle. We're not going to talk about targets today, we'll talk about targets next time. So really, this is an opportunity for you to really talk about your strengths in your practice and also areas you want to carry on working on. Is that okay? How's that sound?
Yeah, it's great. Yeah.
Fab. Well, you'll not be surprised that it'd be good to start with a positive. So if you think about your teaching practice generally, and the way that you work, what are the positives? What are the strengths that you've been noticing this last year?
So for me, my strengths are probably in things like curriculum development, in the way that I try and produce lessons that the students can engage with, trying to make lessons interesting, the way that I question, trying not to be the person who's standing at the front and just telling them what to do, but rather getting them involved. I prefer them to be in groups, and engaging in conversation, and then you're asking a question that they unpack. Yes. And then another area would be that within that would be the importance of asking specific questions that generate that growth, and that asking the question why they're learning a particular topic. And then I guess around school, I like being the person who's looking out for other members of staff and checking in on them and helping them, just seeing how they're doing. If they've had a bad day or something's gone wrong, then maybe touching base with them the next day or in the afternoon.
Oh, thank you. Excuse me 1 second. I need to knock a light off there. So the 3 different areas that you've talked about, like two into your classroom practice, and 1 is more, I suppose, your nurturing pastoral side of it. Well, should we put each of them under the spotlight a little bit, talk about them a bit more?
Yeah.
But start with the first one. You said you like organizing your students in groups, you like having collaborative learning, and you like them being engaged in their activities in that way. So what's important about that, and how's that all going?
You said that again, you crashed.
Oh, sorry. So what's important about working in that way, that collaborative way, and having your students work?
So for me, it's they get a chance to hear other people's opinions and viewpoints, rather than just their own story in their head and what they think is right and what they think is wrong. And that brings a greater clarity to the direction of the conversation, and a greater sense of respect of other people's opinion. So it looks at not only the skills of listening and asking questions of what people hear, but also in terms of an understanding of what is actually being said.
Okay. So it's wider than, if you like, the subject and working in the subject. There's some extra skills that you want your students to learn. What's important about that for you?
Because the subject that something that I'm particularly talking about is I'm doing PSHE for year 7 and year 8, and so in this environment where it's particularly about life skills, they take away these skills and they can apply them at different subjects. But also it may be, for example, they are able to ask a question at the dinner table at home, so it affects home life and the conversations around the dinner table. So it's not just about what happens in the classroom. I'm trying to impact these kids to think about how life happens and how they can be effective in the decisions they make, that will influence them outside and moving onwards.
Okay, fab. Thank you for that. So a wider responsibility than simply within the classroom. Fab. Thank you. And actually, you started talking about questioning. So let's move into that. You've talked about the why and having the quality of your questions. This might seem a bit of an obvious question to ask as a coach, but what's important for you about getting your questions really good and clear and sharp?
I think probably over the last year, I've gone from loading questions where I've asked a question and asked another one, and then once I've clarified in my head the question I'm trying to ask, I've landed on a question. So over this last year, I've now come to the point where I can ask one specific question that's short, and acts as a trigger for them to then pursue what they think is taking place. And as they hear that question, then I can help them dig down in whatever their opinion is with other further simple questions that draw out their knowledge and understanding. And that permeates within the either the group work that they're doing or the class work that they're doing.
What do you notice when you see that's going well and everyone's in flow, your questions are good, and the students are engaged in it? What do you notice?
Energy in the room. They love hearing what other people's opinions are. There's an energy in terms of you can almost hear their brains functioning faster as they have clarity in terms of the direction that they are going on the thought process that they are bringing forth. And then allows, as the question is simpler, so their verbal processing becomes much more directive and much more clear.
Yes. Okay. So you're seeing their enthusiasm, but also actually how they're working.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. So we're starting to look at your strengths and the two you put under the spotlight in the classroom. And I don't really like using the word evidence, but if you're going to sort of evaluate and demonstrate tangible benefits of working in this way, how would you describe that? What do you see? What is the evidence?
So there's one particular unit that I use, which is called the Island, where this is with year 7, where I'm asking them to take 500 people and put them on an island where there's nothing exists. And through that unit, we look at punishments and consequences and rules and government and currency and the environment and religion. And so in this environment where there is so much information, actually what I'm trying to get them to do is to think about how they would do that and then what the consequences of that would be. And then the second part of that is about people. So we not only do we look at the structure of the island, we also look at what type of people we might want to put on the island. And as a result of that, we look at 4 photographs that all tell a different story. And we then look at the perception of looking at a story or looking at a photo, and then realizing that the reality of the story is not the perception of the perception of this of what we see in the photo is not actually the reality of their story. And so that completely challenges their viewpoint and makes them think about, actually, I need to be careful about how I ask a question or how I perceive somebody's thinking, because they might not be the same as mine.
Yes. Okay. So you're picking up and you're seeing evidence that actually these approaches these are appropriate approaches for this type of work.
Yeah, definitely. The depth of understanding and the depth of questioning as a result of these conversations is fantastic. And so actually I know for a fact that the Year 7s love the lessons that we do, because they come in. It may be because they don't have to do a lot of writing and they do a lot of discussion, and maybe part of it, but actually they love being heard and they love hearing what other people have to say.
Okay, so there's something then, that listening that goes on as well. Fab. Well, thank you for sharing that. Okay, let's spend a bit of time on that third one that you mentioned, which is more your pastoral work with your colleagues, and it sounds like it's like an informal thing that you're invited, or you're inviting yourself to take notice of when people are struggling and then offer them a bit of a leg up. What's important to you about that?
I think I did a strength finder with Gallup with a coach over the last couple of years, and it came down to this sense of connectedness, empathy, positivity, and responsibility, and being restorative, and all of those strengths help when I'm functioning in that kind of sweet spot. It means that I can walk into a staff room, listen to what somebody has to say, and be aware of their emotional state. And then, because of my experience as being a leader outside of school and understanding the pressures of being a leader, I can then relate to them, and I know what it's like for somebody to say maybe a day or 2 days later, how are you doing? Are you doing okay? And you said you had a bad lesson, or that you found such and such was really difficult. How's that working? And just being that supportive person in the background, not really, just picking up where people are at. And another thing that I love doing is looking at situations and helping to, and this is a fine balance, but helping to see a process that could be improved. And so in a way that's helpful, because you can suggest ways that you can improve which aren't helpful, but finding ways that are helpful in trying to take a system going, actually, have you thought about doing this, or what might be the consequence of doing that? Then again helps that person thrive more in the environment that they're in.
Okay, thank you for that. So you're, and that second thing you described, that's about picking up when it's actually a system or a process that is making someone either upset or okay. And when you talk about this as something that's going well, is it like this is a regular thing you do, like it's the thing you do on a weekly basis, or is it just as and when you notice it? Like what's the sort of frequency?
This is something that I can't help but pick up. It's like I have a little radar that, as I move around, it could be a friend I'm meeting at a coffee. I think because of my background as a third culture kid, where I've moved between different environments and I've had to be very observant, I just have that ability to pick up what is going on in a room, and therefore be able to choose where to step in and encourage or pick up another day.
So you're like the roving well-being support, aren't you? On the move. Move. Okay. And benefits you're seeing, like what are you observing in colleagues when you're able to give this bit of support to them?
I think it goes from a range from just the appreciation of being noticed in a day. As teachers, school can be really fast, and we have to make quick decisions. And having somebody stop on the corridor and just say, "Well, how are you doing today?" That one thing can actually change somebody's day.
Yes.
And so it's those kind of things that I think are the impact. Is not necessarily the big things, but actually just having somebody noticing you.
Yes.
Is important.
Yes. Thank you. And I can imagine that must feel quite rewarding. But what is it that you get from that, from supporting your colleagues that way?
For me, it's about celebrating them. It's about seeing them thrive. If they're having a hard time, but seeing a smile on their face because a question's been asked and they've been listened to, or they've had 5 minutes to download what's just happened and they go away feeling better. That's a win for me. So a win for them is a win for me.
Okay. So you're relishing the fact that this is helping them. Okay, thank you. Well, so these are three substantial areas that you put under the spotlight and you've been able to explain really well. So thank you for that. And before we move on, let's look at the other side of it. The things that you think, oh, I wish this was a bit better. We all have it, right? We all have areas that we would like to improve. So if you're okay to share, where just maybe pick a couple of areas that you think, and it can be either to do with your core practice or something that you're looking to stretch. Areas that you think I'd like to improve.
I think that as a result of doing the coaching course this year, I would love to find times to see that grow more in either one-to-one with students or in like a scheme of work or something where I can transfer those skills specifically into developing coaching within those students or the staff.
Yes. Okay. And what's important about that?
I think that it equips students to develop the skills we were talking about earlier, the ability to question and to listen more intently, and to be able to set out their own targets. But it also develops that sense of well-being where you've got somebody, you're giving people skills to listen to somebody, and therefore they receive an increase in well-being because they've been heard. And it's always telling when, you know, as teachers, we're really good at giving advice. And so that sense of where you've got talking to somebody without them saying, oh, but you should do this and you should do that and you should do that is really important. So providing kids with those skills, the students with those skills is another step forward in that.
Okay. And it does sound a bit like it's an evolution of what you're working towards, this type of student-led approach to them developing as learners. Okay, fab. Okay, so that's one area, and maybe we'll talk in a while about targets. Maybe that's what you talked about turns up as one of your targets. Any other areas that you think, yeah, I'd really like to improve that to do with your, you know, your core role?
I think one of the things I've noticed over the last 4 years, I used to be full-time and I'm part-time, and the challenge of part-time is, and it goes alongside with the connectedness thing, is the fact that because I'm only there on a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, as opposed to Monday and Friday, there is the temptation. Sometimes it's harder to engage.
Yes.
Because you don't see people on the Monday and the Friday, which are often the times where you share a bit about yourself. So it requires much more work to you know, on Tuesday, how was your weekend? It's a bit of a funny conversation. It's like, well, it's Tuesday, you know. It's like, if you asked me yesterday, I'd be able to tell you about your weekend. We're almost in the middle of the week. So for me, I think sometimes I can, with that need for depth in conversation, or that desire for depth in conversation, I can lazy is not the right word, but it's sometimes harder work. Sometimes it comes really easily, and sometimes it requires me, actually, I need to spend more time in the staff room, or I need to be having dinner with my colleagues as opposed to sitting with a set of colleagues in a particular room. If that makes sense?
Okay, so that connection with your colleagues, in particularly, again, more of your pastoral work, the idea that it's harder when you're part-time, missing out the middle of the week. Okay, fine. Okay, super. And then one final thing, perhaps something to do with your teaching practice, one area of improvement.
So an area of improvement would definitely be my marking. That would be something that I probably definitely want to improve. I enjoy marking because I mark almost as a coach.
Yes.
So I will mark with questions as opposed to sets, because ultimately I want them to reflect on their work. So asking them if they've done homework, what does the homework look like?
Yes.
You know, did you enjoy your homework? What was hard about it? And all, like, you're involving a coaching conversation even in your marking, but finding the time to do it regularly is hard.
Okay, so you have an aspiration for a certain style of marking, but getting the frequency isn't enough.
Yeah.
Okay. Fab. Brilliant. Okay. Well, thank you for sharing. I think, you know, we've done a couple of things, and you really put and considered your strengths. You've also considered some development areas. So I'm not your line manager, but if your line manager were running this meeting, now would be the wonderful, perfect opportunity to be able to talk about how good you are at your job and these things that you are describing so well. So I'm not going to make it up, but, you know, I can talk about your enthusiasm and your commitment and your passion and your care for other people, because that shines through in everything you say, and I really hope and encourage you to carry on celebrating it. So thank you so much for sharing this today. It's been really rich to hear it. Let's talk a little bit about some next steps. So we're not today going to talk about targets, but we will come back and we'll have another conversation and we'll talk about targets. To give you a little bit of a steer, and, you know, there is paperwork to follow. The things that I really want you to think about in terms of targets is, like, a target to do with your core role is absolutely fine. That as practitioners, we have a target that relates to the, if you like, the nuts and bolts of doing our job, trying to get better at one thing. So it might be the marking thing you mentioned, it might be something different. A target that is an aspiration or a stretch or something new or something developmental, providing it supports the school. They're the two main parameters that I want you to think about. So the idea that it's something to do with your core practice and something that might be a stretch for you. What's really important as like an overarching theme for all of your targets, any targets you come up with, is that they need to be useful. You know, they need to be useful and beneficial for you, for students and for the school. So it's not about pet projects. It's about making sure that you've come up with targets that are beneficial. How does that sound? Is that okay?
Yeah, it's great.
Fab. Okay, so when we next meet, we will get into that and we'll talk about your targets. So let's bring this conversation to a close. I want to ask you really to reflect. Like what's been useful and interesting about talking through where you're at in your practice?
The one thing that's actually made me realize is that although my marking is a weakness, and I know it needs to be the time I need to do it, the being more regular. Actually, I hadn't processed the fact that I was coaching within my marking until I said it, which is really interesting. So that was something that stood out for me in relation to that and the impact that has. I continually find the tension between, on the one hand, I love helping others thrive, so I love investing in other people to thrive in the work environment. But that can't happen if I'm not making the effort to get to the staff room, or I'm not making effort to sit down with them. So that was also an interesting reflection too.
Okay. So you're picking up a couple of things that you hadn't thought about before talking this through.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And just more generally, like now we will meet next year and next week, and we'll talk about targets. But knowing that you're bringing this type of approach, this reflective approach, and maybe some proactive targets, what does that make you look forward to about your next year at work?
I'm really looking forward to. I'm looking forward to seeing I'm really looking forward to seeing how the areas of my life that I'm starting to move into, like the coaching, is becoming more and more prominent in my teaching. And so, just like my marking, where I've just spoken about that, like everything is starting to become the DNA of my teaching practice, as it were, and that's exciting.
Right. So you're gonna have your coaching goggles on all the time. It sounds like, doesn't it?
Yeah.
We should think about that. And how are you feeling at the end of this conversation, James?
Yeah, really good. It's been good to reflect. It's good to touch base with the things that I feel that I'm doing well, and then it's good to see how the reflections are starting to impact my thinking moving forward.
Right, fab. Thank you. Well, listen, thank you. I really appreciate that. I get that there's some openness, and a bit of vulnerability, but also some real clarity in how you've explained these things. So I found it really rich and really interesting to listen to, and I look forward to our next chat when we talk about targets. Thank you so much, James.
Brilliant. Thank you.